Hello, and welcome to the Canadian Story, where we discuss what Canada is, what Canada could be, and what Canada should be. Erin, welcome to the podcast. I'm glad that you know Zach and have decided to join us. First off, I'd like you to tell all the listeners where they can find you on social media and on the internet.
Thank you so much for having me. First of all, it's really fun. I've done a lot of things in my career, but I primarily these days focus on trying to change the wellness game by looking at our wellness from absolutely all corners in a really holistic way. So people can find me. We're 100% online these days. So people can find us at mindbodyrebellion.com.
Oh, I love that. And that title, I think we're going to be diving into. We were talking a little bit before we started recording about how we're going to dive into that. But I just like to know, just to start off, what do you love about this country that you call home?
You know, it's such a massive question. There's truthfully, so many things. As a lover of the outdoors and nature and being alone and hiking and climbing and such with my dog, I have to say that the very first thing that comes to my mind when I think of what I love about this country, it's the space. It's the different types of landscapes. It's the majesty of here locally where we are in Ontario, the escarpment, the farmers' fields, we have so much beautiful outdoor space that we're so blessed to have. And maybe sometimes we forget and we take for granted. But, the other thing that I love so much about Canada and having grown up both in the Toronto area as well as just outside of Quebec City, we always think of some of our bigger cities as being centers of diversity. And to me, it's the way that diversity translates into unity that I love the absolute most.
I absolutely love that idea. I want us to just riff on this for as long as we can, because this is the purpose of this podcast. But before we do that, why don't you share a little bit of background with our listeners about how you've come to this? Give us some of the, the biography facts, but also the enlightenment moment facts where you kind of had the light bulb come on.
Sure. I think that for me, so, when people ask me, what has been sort of the ultimate purpose behind your career path, I usually can sum it up just by saying, my goal in all of my work and all of my coaching and consulting, my goal has always been to create shifts in our communities through storytelling. And I have a background as in business development, both in small business as well as not-for-profit. And I've worked both in healthcare as well as in the wellness space primarily. And movement has always been integral in my life. I had a bit of a turbulent teenage years. And I always say, it was coming home to movement that kept me whole, as well as books. But coming home to movement has always kept me whole. And throughout my journey in healthcare, it has been so interesting to see the way that movement can really connect people, and also the way that movement can help people dig deep and find the fighting spirit that they maybe didn't know that they have.
I just want to pull out a little thing that I noticed on your Instagram, that you've read Untamed. Just give me 50 seconds. What do you think of that book, and did it have an impact on you?
Yeah, my initial impression of the book, overall, I love the book. My initial impression of the book was that there were just so many incredible nuggets that you could take and run with and really light up over. However, there were some other, bits and pieces in the book that I read the book twice. And there were some other bits and pieces of the book that after I sat with them, maybe weren't my favorite conceptually. However, the thing that I love about Untamed is that Glennon Doyle is really, it's a memoir. It's not a how-to book. It's not a self-help book. It's a memoir, and it's perfectly imperfect.
Oh, yes.
So,
I completely agree. And I think this is the way that we should be moving. And this is just a thought that I'm having. You can tell me, David, you're totally wrong. But my thought is, I think that's what place we need to move in the wellness space. So we need to like, so much of medicine is about prescription. Let's not talk about prescription. Let's show our journey and say, this is how I do it. You all have to find your own way, but here are some tools that might be useful, and come at it with humility instead of this top-down dictatorial, this is how you have to do things way.
Well, and you know why, David? The reason for that, because you're 100% right. And I do believe that this is the wave of the future for wellness. And I strongly advocate for that. And the reason for it is because the old way that you described, the outdated way, which is still very much in practice and primarily in practice, it's disempowering, right? It takes the answers away from the human and facilitates this constant outsourcing of answers. And so we've learned to stop going within, to understand, how do we feel? What do we need? What does our body need? Because what my body needs today and what your body needs today are going to be two different things. And so we've become used to paying trainers, paying coaches, asking the doctor, as you say, getting that prescription. And it's quite mindless, right? We take the orders, we check the boxes. And then when we don't feel good, we can pass blame. And we never really own our journey, our wellness journey, our physical journey. And
where's the responsibility? Where's the responsibility there? Where's the the push for personal development? Where's the free agency? We're giving up our essence, our freedom, our personal agency every moment of every day. We're not even aware of it.
That's right. That's right. And that's why, I love that you're talking about this, David. I didn't know you were going to bring this up, but it's funny. I often rub people the wrong way because we talk a lot about, it's not that I'm anti-wearable, but we talk a lot about ditching technology when it comes to wellness, because, if we're constantly outsourcing how we're feeling and how we're doing and what our health is like in accordance to what the scale says, what our wearable says, the calories we've burned, the inches around the waist, if we're constantly outsourcing how we feel to someone or something else, then we are never taking ownership and we're never empowering ourselves to create change that is lasting. And that's why the industry makes bazillions of dollars off the failure roller coaster, right? The failure cycle, because we're never owning the journey.
Do you mind if I share a little personal anecdote about that?
Of course.
Well, so for me, I never really, I used to be a smoker and a drinker, and I didn't take care of my body.
Me too, friends. Absolutely.
Didn't care about myself at all on a physical level. And I'm on a journey myself. I'm not fully there, but I'm on a journey of recovery, I would say, from that lack of self-love, almost that self-hatred. But I also gained a lot of weight from all the beer I was drinking, and I was pretty overweight. I didn't even really notice it because I was so unaware of my physical self. But when I started to pay attention, I would fluctuate and I didn't seem to be able to lose it. And I was always looking at the scale, like you said, thinking about data. And you know what? The one thing that changed everything for me, just one phrase that spiritually transformed that journey for me, was it's okay to be hungry. I had never thought about that on a conscious level. Now, when I'm hungry, sometimes I don't eat. I'm not low energy. I'm actually higher energy. I'm shedding pounds. I feel on the top of my game in every way. And it's one little phrase. I'm not.
Well, what's so fascinating about that? Yeah. What's so fascinating about that, though, is that we've become disassociated from what it means to be hungry. Right? Generally speaking, when we feel hungry, we're actually uncomfortable and we're trying to self-soothe, right? Because true hunger, it's funny. The dietitian that we work with, who's a friend and who I love, Jess Palladino, she always says, when you're hungry, you will eat anything. And when you're not really hungry, but you think you're hungry, you have a craving. right? You're craving.
Wow, that is great.
Right? Isn't that mind blowing? Yeah, and it's really, again, it's about coming back and taking ownership of your feelings. It's asking yourself, am I actually experiencing hunger? Because if you're experiencing hunger, you should most likely eat. However, usually the answer, we're very blessed, right? In the culture that we live in, usually the answer for many of us is no, I'm actually uncomfortable and I want something to change. And oftentimes it's about having a glass of water and going within, taking some breaths and doing something else proactive.
Have you noticed, I've noticed this with my phone, I also use it as a self-soothing mechanism. If I'm awkward, I'll look at my phone and start texting someone.
Well, we know that you're not alone. We know that you're like billions of everybody. Everybody's doing this, and we've become a numbing. And this goes back to the function of the brain and that primal brain. We are such fascinating creatures, but we numb ourselves all day with streaming, movies, shows, Instagram, food, definitely wine, beer, cigarettes. I was a heavy smoker back in the day, and that's why
it is a total soothing habit. 100%. That's what it is. It's just it's like you're a baby and you're just trying to give it a soother.
Yeah. But what's neat about smoking, though, is that not neat about smoking, but what's fascinating about it is that I believe that one of the reasons that smoking is so addictive is that it's a consistent pause for 5 minutes of breath.
It's meditative. And it's
meditative.
Social.
It's social, but it's also, you're actually in deep observation of your breath. You can actually physically see your breath with your eyeballs as you exhale.
True.
And that is, right? It's a very grounding activity. Obviously is not healthy. So it's amazing because we've had so much success with our members over the years in supporting them with quitting smoking through a breath practice. And it's very cool because it's also, we're craving, obviously there's a chemical dependency there, but what I believe that we're craving is that very breath connected time out.
That is an insight I had never even conceived of. Thank you I hope that all you listeners appreciate that. I really appreciate it as someone who quit smoking myself.
Cool, right? And I think people shouldn't be ashamed of a smoking habit. I think it's a very understandable habit to have. It's one that you want to break, but I think in a way, it's a sign that you're craving exactly what your body needs in some ways. And so it's just about replacing that with a healthier timeout.
I love that. Okay, I want to circle back to diversity and unity and the spiritual realizations you're having around this. But before that, I just want you to talk a little bit about what role exercise plays in mental health from your perspective.
Oh, wow. I mean, all the role. I think that, first of all, I think the primary thing that people can do for themselves if they're trying to shift their mental health is to establish some type of morning ritual. And we coach our members on what that could be. And we have something that we call a 10-second morning that I can share with you afterward. But oftentimes, movement is the absolute easiest way to get inside your body. So the way that you described, you were gaining weight, but you didn't even know because you really weren't living inside your body. You were just kind of going through a lot of motions, doing a lot of self-soothing, and you kind of lose touch with who you are, how you look, how you feel. Movement is just one of the quickest, easiest ways to truly get inside your body. You can't lie to yourself when you're moving because you're going to find where you're stuck, where you're tight, where you're in pain, where you're not feeling how you want to be feeling. So it's just such a great path forward for people on their wellness, overall wellness journey.
Okay, I have one more thing just because I love the way your mind works. My girlfriend has this phrase that I absolutely love where she says, people's lives have changed by walking for an hour a day. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I would layer on to that if they're walking device free.
I think she would 100% agree with you. That's like not even
I
listening to
bet.
music, nothing.
Yeah, I remember in the beginning of the podcast when all of us were feeling so much uncertainty and sort of what the heck's going on, and we were, often many of us were even afraid to walk the dog or be outside. Many of our members were walking, and I was as well in the morning from time to time with podcasts. And I think that what your girlfriend is saying is true, because walking without your device just allows you to be in your environment and to see your neighbors, right? I mean, we've all said this during the pandemic, for those of us who don't live in a building, right? If you live in a residential neighborhood with houses, so many of us are walking around and really seeing our neighbors, are seeing their homes and absorbing our environment the way that we haven't before. And if you can add a layer of mindfulness to your morning walk and really ask yourself, go through the five senses. What do I smell? What do I feel? How does the air feel? What do I hear? It's such a great way to completely transform your connection.
Oh, this is a mindfulness journey you're taking us on right now, and I couldn't speak more highly of mindfulness. It's a journey that I've only been on for about 2 years now, but it's transformed things I didn't think were possible. Like if you'd said to me 2 years ago, David, you're going to stop regularly drinking, you're going to completely stop smoking cigarettes, and you're going to love your life and wake up every morning rested, I wouldn't have believed you. I would have said that is never going to be my life. But like you said, like I loved how you just opened my mind up a little more. Observation, like just observing even the breath thing that you were saying earlier. Being observant and actually in the now can bring so much peace to your day. You're not worrying, you're just existing.
Well, and so I love what you're saying so much, and it's very important. And I don't think that we should skip over it, because, so many of our members will come to us because they want to do movement. They want to do workouts. They want to change their body. And we lead everything that we do with mindset practice. And we always say, people will say, my whole life has completely changed. The sky is bluer. My food tastes better. The birds are chirpier. What's going on? And it's just very cool, because actually nothing changed. Yes, maybe you've started to make better choices because you've become more present. But what I love about what you're describing is that life doesn't get better because of all these profound changes that you've made per se. It gets better because you're present enough to notice how cool it is that, maybe there's a awesome, cute squirrel sitting on your fence with a walnut. Right? It's like just the tiny things that
if you pay enough attention in the world, there is magic everywhere.
Yes, that's it, my friend. That is it.
Okay, so let's dig into the meat of this idea of diversity and unity, because honestly, that this is the reason for this podcast. Is I think we've been fed a lie, which is that diversity is strength, and that isn't actually what makes Canada amazing. It's that unity is what makes us a beautiful country.
Well, I agree. And I think, I've always been fascinated with what I call the rebel path. I grew up with a grandfather who came here after growing up for most of his childhood in an orphanage. After losing his parents, he lost his father, who was in the military, and his mom to tuberculosis. And I was always really taken with the amount of bravery that it took for a young man to come to a place he'd never been before and start over. And when I was old enough to realize that in so many ways, our communities are made up of infinite stories of these kinds.
Yes.
It has always taken me, right? It's always captivated me. And I think it's enchanting because, we really truly are surrounded by people who have meshed their worlds together. And I believe that you are right. And that it's the illuminating of these stories that is the path forward for Canada. All of the stories, from our Indigenous peoples to everybody.
All of them, all the stories, not one story, all of them. Our stories together are a story.
Isn't that true? It's interesting as well, because I think that the other thing, when you think about diversity toward unity, I also think environmentally about our country and just the landscape of our country, the resources in the country, and all of the things from that perspective that we don't tell the stories of, people's interactions with our country, with the land. We have such an unbelievable agricultural story here in Canada.
Agricultural,
there's just so
forestry, mining.
Yes.
People who have gone out and created we are builders. We're builders of things. And I think, Zach and I recently recorded an episode with a fellow who's authored a book that is building an incredibly bigger thing that Canada could lead on the world stage from a foreign policy perspective. But I also think, why can't Canada be building local communities that people love? Like, I want companies that are founded in a place like Cambridge to be bringing the jobs to Cambridge, not to go into Toronto. Let's stop this idea that Canada means you have to live in a big city. We can make our small towns into the kind of idyllic places that are the envy of the world. And you know what? A country that does that really well is Switzerland. They do it amazingly. They keep the authenticity of their place, but they make it very easy to bring wealth and prosperity to those places too. It's not all about just it's not all about manufacturing anything. There's diversity in their single focus on preserving what it is to be Swiss.
Well, and I think that that's where the vital importance of storytelling comes in, and actually making it your personal responsibility to involve yourself in the listening to and the sharing of stories. And one of the fun things that I did quite by accident, actually, in 2020 is I read almost exclusively, outside of, personal growth and business, almost exclusively Canadian books in 2020.
Oh, I love that.
And, to be honest, I felt a little bit sad about myself, because there were some stories that really profoundly impacted me. And it's funny, I share a reading list with my members twice a year. And this year's was the shortest, because I reread almost every book that I read. I think that the pandemic has just, first of all, a lot of us are just feeling like we have a lot of brain fog, and focus is hard to come by some days.
We're social animals, and this is social aspect of who we are. It's been ripped out of our souls. We can't even go to dinner with one another. Like, you want to go hang out? It's horrible.
It's really interesting. And I think that the other thing is that this experience has also, I think it's asked us to pay a different type of attention. And I didn't just want, I read like I'm eating chips. Like I have books everywhere, all over my house, all over my office. But this year I really wanted to hear the stories. And especially once I sort of made this decision, which, it started with 2 or 3 books. And then I thought, you know what, I'm just going to basically read Canadian books this year. And I was so profoundly moved. The first book that I had read, is it From the Ashes by Jessie Thistle, in 2019, I believe, which sort of kicked off a desire to read a bunch more of Canadian authors. But I read Forgiveness by Mark Sakamoto.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to. You know what? You're making me feel a lot of shame right now, in a good way. I'm like, I need to read more Canadian novels. Like, I have a podcast about books and movies, another one, different one. But I haven't read enough Canadian. You're calling me out, and I love it. I think all of us, like, we need to be Canadians and like appreciate our own national story.
Yes, and you know why this is important, though? I think that Canadians can fall into the habit of feeling like we are better, and that we don't have conflict in this country, and that we're very tolerant. And most of the stories that I read, especially Forgiveness, which I'm never going to forget that book, which focuses on the journeys of Japanese Canadians around the time of Pearl Harbor.
I'm going to read it. I'm going to pick it up today. I'm ordering it on Amazon, and everyone else should too.
I will tell you, I think it's the responsibility of every single Canadian to read this book and some of the others that I read this past year. But I really realized, frankly, shame on us for not putting so much more energy behind this type of vital storytelling, because I think
we're so obsessed with America. We're so obsessed with America.
Yes.
We're focused on it all the time. We have this beautiful thing happening in our backyard, and we're ignoring it.
Yes.
I love this. Okay, I have a request for you.
Yes.
Would you be willing, for the listeners of this podcast, to put together a 5-book list that we could push out to the people who've liked our page, letting them know the 5 books you have to read, Canadian books you have to read to understand our mythos?
I would love to, and I already have it. We just sent it out to our members, so I can fire it over to you ASAP.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, to your point about our obsession with south of the border, there's been a real shift with that, and this is how the conversation started for me when I was reflecting on what it means to be Canadian at the very beginning of the pandemic. My husband and I were watching something. I don't know what we were watching, and I have a feeling you're going to be too young to remember it maybe, but when I was a kid in the 70s, there were these little CBC, were they CBC? There were these little it was the Canadian Film Board vignettes that Canadian would come Minute? On before.
The Canadian Minute?
No, I don't know if it was the Canadian Minute, but there was this little log rider video that I know many people who are my age will remember and older. And, I think that little snips of Canadian culture were just more a part of our day-to-day life. And I think that what's interesting is just that, with streaming and syndicated TV and less local radio, less local television, just over time, this has changed so much, whereby if you were, 25 years old, 30 years old, I think that it would be very easy not to have many senses whatsoever of a lot of Canadian stories. And so he and I went on this tangent of talking about how do we bring this back? How do we bring this back? And this is really when my book spree started. And it was something that I wanted to kind of sit with personally and really reflect on, which I did all year long. And before I started to have conversation about it, because, honestly, David, I think that we are so blessed to live in this country. And while, we've been able to shine a big, big light over the last few years. And I think that, we've had great champions shining lights on some important things that we need to talk about, like Gord Downey's insistence that we look at the residential school system. I think that we are just in such a position to, right now in the pandemic, to be able to take advantage of this opportunity to connect with where we live, with one another, to actually see one another and get off that hamster wheel, get off of media, get off of TV, get off of our devices, and actually be where we are. How can you lift up your neighbor? How can you help that small business down the street that you've walked past a million times and you've never purchased from because maybe they don't have a product that's relevant to you, but hey, that's a person and they're one of your neighbors. So how can we?
Oh, I love this. I have a mantra. Do you want to hear it?
Of course.
A rising tide lifts all ships. I am the tide. Right. I am the tide. Embody it. Instead of, so there's this mentality, a scarcity mindset, right? Where people are sitting there thinking that there's only so much love to go around, only so much happiness, only so much money, only so much hope. And we all have to keep our little piece and cling to it, because if we shared it, it might be less. But the truth, the real truth, is that the world is abundant. And that is a Canadian value, abundance. And we need to get away from this mindset that there's only a little, only enough for me just, and if only I'm only going to barely scrape by. No. And we have a bad tendency as Canadians, and I want to challenge it right now, because if you love something, you also criticize the bad things about it. You don't just say, oh no, that's fine, we don't care about that, right? If I truly love myself, I don't let myself keep smoking. It's not because, I don't like the little meditative time or the dopamine rush. It's because in the long run, I know it's bad for me. And here, you want to know what I think Canada's smoking is? We don't celebrate our winners. We act like if someone's a winner, someone else is a loser. And we need to start talking about each other's successes and championing our fellow citizens and being like, look at that guy, he's rocking it. I love it. I love seeing my fellow Canadians win. And we do love it with hockey. We all come together. We're like, yes, I love it when we win, but it's the only thing we do it with. We need to start saying, I love it when Canadians win. And I want to see more Canadians win. I want Canadian companies to do well. I want Canadians because that's what it means to love a place, is to want it to do well.
Well, and this is what's interesting is that, our humility is part of what's very special about us here in Canada, all of us. But celebrating wins is not counter to humility. I think
exactly
what you're saying is so important.
I think we feel like it is. I think, like, for example, and I say this all the time, I actually think I like it when my friends succeed even more than when I do. I get so excited when I see my friend have a big win. I'll give you an example. I have one guy that I'm kind of trying to mentor, and he was thinking of just going and getting, a job where he's salaried. And I'm like, you're really talented. You don't need to go that path. Start a consulting firm. You will have 10 times more time because they won't be working you like a dog. You work for yourself. And 2, you just have the connections and network already. You don't need to take that step, right? He does it, and he's just started crushing it. And he's doing it because he's smart. He's talented. He's in tune with himself. He's aware. He reads. He loves poetry, right? This is a guy who doesn't need to go and just work for someone else. He could build something himself. And I celebrate that. And you know what? I didn't do that for almost my whole 20s. I worked for other people. Now I'm glad I did that for the reasons, but my journey doesn't have to be his. He doesn't have to learn the lessons I learned the hard way, right? He can learn them himself. And then just
yes, but the way that you learned I think that hard road sometimes is what it takes.
No, and you know what? Maybe it is. That's a good point.
It's we can't fast forward. I mean, I think that when you think about there's the obstacle is the path, right?
No, the obstacle is the way. The obstacle is the way. It's true. Yeah. No, you're right.
It's really, truly, the obstacle is always so rich with the lessons that we need in order to thrive. And I think, we thrive when we are of service, and that's why you love when your friends win. And I would like to ask you a question, because I know you said you grew up in a small community. Did you see more or less you talked about people holding on tight, right? And being unwilling to share customers, share support, share whatever it might be. Did you see more or less of that in a small community versus living in a bigger city?
Well, just to be frank, my father's a pastor, and I grew up very religious. So my conception of reality growing up was very different than the reality I see outside of faith-based communities. Because within faith-based communities, sharing is just normal. There's never this conception that you just have to make it on your own. Everybody helps each other. And it's not in some kind of cultish communitarian sort of way. It's just like there's a level of trust and connection and unity. Let's call it unity. There's a level of unity that provides a safe environment for growth, and also self-reflection. Because one of the most dangerous things about self-reflection in a hostile environment is you can just get attacked, or someone can become emotionally abusive with you. But I find in healthy, and I distinguish between religious and spiritual communities. A religious community can be very oppressive. A faith-based community can be incredibly uplifting and enriching. Now, I think all people we all mess up our path. We all make mistakes. And like you said, the obstacle is so rich with the lessons it teaches us. And I think a humble person is someone who takes their mistakes and learns from them and admits that they make mistakes. And I find that's not always the case in religious communities. But yeah, by and large, I have found that there's more, when there is community, there's more sense of belonging. And that's why people cling to their identities, because they actually tie them to their community.
Well, but what's interesting is community is what is missing for so many people, because every man for himself, it might feel empowering, the illusion of, I'm going to make it on my own, that sort of feeling of, I got this and it's all on my shoulders. It only takes us so far. And that's why I love the way that so many fitness communities have embraced and yoga communities
a
and
lot
such
of people
have understood.
Have done that. CrossFit, I definitely know a lot of people who feel
CrossFit nails it. Yeah, CrossFit does it so well. And I think that, it's not novel. It's ridiculous to imagine that, I remember doing an interview maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and somebody asked me, where I got the novel idea, because I've been doing really intentional community building for all of my clients and all of my projects over the years, all of my own personal businesses, where I got the novel idea that community is part of wellness. And I thought, wow, that's such a weird question, because we're social creatures.
Yeah, I feel like it's like the most basic human need, right? It's like we need one another.
Well, it used to, we always hear like it takes a village. And I know when I would travel, through India and different parts of the world, you truly see, however many generations of people all running around after each other's kids and chickens and everything else. And we are missing that. We're all alone, and
people are because so lonely.
But they're so lonely. And who I think suffers in one of the biggest ways is women, moms. We used to really be able to raise our children together with the support of multiple generations and one another, and our whole community. And now so many moms are feeling so isolated. We work with so many women who will say, I don't know who to ask. On Instagram, it looks like everybody's momming perfectly. And I feel silly because I don't have the answers. And we're not supposed to have the answers. You learn them from observing. And so it's fascinating.
You have a lot of wisdom. This is nuts. I am so blown away. I want to have you on the podcast again. This is great. I guess the final question that I would have for you in this last 5 minutes is, what do you think Canada could be, and what do you think it should be?
Well, in so many ways, I think we've touched on it. I think that I truly believe that through the storytelling and the sharing of these rebel paths, because I believe we have so many extraordinary game changers in a history of extraordinary game changers in our country, on this soil. I truly believe that if we shined a light on these stories and one another's stories, that we could go from calling diversity one of our best qualities to this unity piece that we've talked about, to imagine living in a country where we can truly see one another and understand one another. And as you say, agree to disagree, because we respect one another as human beings. Kindness will change the world. Kindness and understanding will change the world.
Yes.
That is our secret weapon right now. And that's what we talk about in Litethriive, our membership community, is that we can work out and we can eat well and we can do all the right things all we want. But at the end of the day, if we want to change our lives and therefore, radiate outward and have a positive impact on the world, we have to start with kindness, and it has to start from within.
And you have to be kind to yourself.
Yeah. It has to start from within.
Yeah. And okay, so I just on that particular point, I couldn't agree more. There is so much pessimism and criticism in this world right now. We live, but you know what? I'm not going to call it spiritual, but there's awakening happening where people are coming to the realization that we're being duped, that we're being made to hate one another. We don't have to do that. We don't have to hate someone for being different. And that's just as true of the Christian who needs to accept that maybe something that they don't think is right is completely fine to have in a society, as it is of the atheist who hates a religious person. Like, let's stop hating one another. Like, who's benefiting from that? We aren't. Canadians aren't.
And who are any one of us? Who are any one of us to cast any judgment?
Who are we to judge? Exactly. Let's stop with that. And but this is what I want to say. The light is more powerful than the darkness. It is. Look at it. One little candle can light up a room. Darkness doesn't exist. It isn't an actual thing. It is the absence of a thing. And what the darkness is the absence of is light. Now, I'm not saying that there's anything spiritual here. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is kindness is that light. Humans get a choice. There is an ancient Stoic proverb that says between the stimulus and the response is the choice. That's what it means to be human. That space between stimulus and response. You get to choose how you view the world. And I just want to point out what Erin said earlier. The sky seems bluer. Nothing has changed. Well, one thing has: perspective.
Yeah.
And I just think that if Canada can change its perspective on how beautiful a thing we've created, what we've created is, we live in pretty much harmony with one another. Yeah. Vastly different communities, and we're all working together. And we're all Canadian. Let's celebrate that. Let's not celebrate that we're all different. Let's celebrate that we all have one value that's the same. We respect one another.
Yeah, we have to get there. And I think that we, as you say, there's the spirit of a revolution. You can feel it. And we're headed for change. We can choose that change.
And let's make it a positive change. Why does it have to be criticism? Why can't it be praising something beautiful?
Yes. Yeah. And that is, as you say, it's a choice. It's a choice moment by moment. And I couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I'm sorry to cut this short, but I guess that just means I'm going to have you on again. So I'm not that sad.
Thank you so much, David. It's a pleasure to chat.
Thank you for listening to The Canadian Story. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at The CAD Story. That's the CAD Story. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. Let's work together to remind Canadians how great their country is.